and I didn't play select travel, but we had very successful Little League teams. We won the state championship for our All-Stars in Washington 2 out of 4 years, and the other 2 years we took second. So, I mean, we were a powerhouse, we'll call it. And I went to the Western Regional Tournament at 11 years old. I had thrown a no-hitter and hit 2 home runs in the semifinals of the state championship tournament. And I went down there, and we're on a bigger stage. There's thousands of parents there. And I had a panic attack. Like, I'm on the mound, I throw a perfect inning, hit a home run, and then go out there in the second inning. And the stadium started closing down on me.
And we didn't have that language then either. So you didn't really know what was going on.
Absolutely not, right? And our parents at that time didn't have, access to the resources and the content and all these things that are out there and available now to really know how to handle that, right? So we chalked it up as like an asthma attack. I was a kid with big emotions, and I think we got to highlight there's, every kid's a little bit different. Even my 3 kids, there's different personality traits, but the bravery it takes and the understanding for the parents entering that space as to what is your child's experience actually like versus what do we perceive their experience to be like. And when they're 0 to 10, the more that we can start to have those conversations about their feelings and about those experiences and helping them process that in a healthy way instead of trying to fix it, I think that becomes the challenge we face as parents in youth sports, is because they are going to go through some highs and they're going to go through some lows. And these can be incredible teaching moments. But if that identity is tied to the achievements, right? We talk about achievement-based identity a lot. That's what started to happen to me even before I got into the select space. And I think that's what happens to a lot of kids when they're in this competitive arena, is we win state championships and, we're all tournament and we're perfect game or whatever, all-star titles that are out there. And that becomes the identity, right, on social media and in the community.
Yeah. So you're talking about the younger age, and that's what I had on my list to ask you next, because you told me that the first, when you were 19, you'd always been the guy in baseball. You'd always been that dude, like capital T, capital D, that dude. And then 19 is when you first hit some adversity and you weren't quite sure how to handle it. And so when you look back at little Travis, what pressures stand out through those little league years, through those select years or whatever, that maybe you didn't recognize as a kid, but as you've gone back and done this unpacking and done this mental work, like, what stand out to you now that maybe you didn't recognize back then?
I think the internal validation versus the external validation. And when you have articles being written about you from 9, 10, 11, 12, and now social media just perpetuates this even more, right? Because it's just more exposure. But at that time, we, like I said, had successful teams. I had successful, individual statistics through all of this stuff. And going into high school had really built the hype. I played varsity football as a freshman, first person to ever do that in our school history, started at middle linebacker. I mean, I was physically developed. I haven't grown since freshman year. Yeah, that guy. And I think one of the things that I see you highlight and we try and highlight too is just because your kid is the best at 9 or 10 or 12, right, doesn't mean they're going to be the best at 15 and 16. And if we put that label on them that they are the best, it's going to be a lot harder when they hit that adversity like I started to in my professional career. So those younger parts of me that I'm processing through my therapeutic journey is understanding what is your belief about self, right? And what in that moment do I believe that I'm that dude, or do I believe that this is a goal for me to play Major League Baseball and here are the steps that I need to focus on taking one day at a time? And the accolades, the achievements, and the press and the notoriety is going to come, but that's outside noise. That's not what I'm chasing. My goal is to become the best baseball player and now the best human being that I can be, versus just selling out for everybody else's giving me the flowers and praising me and putting me up on this pedestal.
So looking back to then, that middle school, high school time, if younger Travis could have heard one message about his identity outside of baseball, what do you wish teenage Travis could have been told about himself?
That's a fantastic question. And I think my parents tried through their own personal struggles.
But teenagers are teenagers, dude. Like
for sure, for sure. I mean,
they could have done everything right, and teenage that dude Travis probably would not have accepted it because you were a teenager who was really great at baseball.
Yeah, and I think it's just understanding the difference between who you are and what you do. And what you do is play sports. What you do is what we do for a living now as adults. But who you are is the personal development stuff that I really have subscribed to as an adult is just trying to focus on being a lifelong learner. I'm never going to be a finished product. I'm going to continue to make mistakes. I think repair is a huge thing we got to learn as parents. But for me as a 13, 14-year-old kid is just understand everything's going to be okay, right? Because at the end of the day, you start to perpetuate this idea that if you don't achieve, it could be making the junior varsity team or the varsity team, or it could be, being a first round draft pick on the high end of this conversation, where we start to develop that attachment to, if I don't achieve this, then I'm going to be less valuable. So like I said, tying that self-worth and identity just to being the baseball player or the stud athlete at the time, instead of, what are the things that I can continue to work on as a human being that are going to serve me when the day comes that they take the jersey away.
Well, and even like big picture outside of that, I mentioned in our episode earlier this year with licensed dietitian Farrell Frankel, we were talking about food, and I'd always been called big guy. And I always thought I was big and fat and all those things already. So when my parents came to me in 10th grade and told me I was gaining weight and that they saw some unhealthy patterns, and I was so offended by that because I had already told myself I was the fat kid. And so I didn't notice the 50, 100 pounds that I gained between my sophomore year of high school and sophomore year of college. Like, until I got to that 360 something pound, 50 pounds, like I never realized I was there. Because in my mind, I had always thought that was who I was already. And so like the idea of separating or taking these things we hear about ourselves or we hear other people say about us and separating them from who we actually are is one of the most important things we can do. And as a kid, as a teenager, it's nearly impossible to do that on your own, which is why it's so much more important for parents to be reinforcing true identity and not performance-based identity.